Addiction is often thought of as a physical dependence on substances, drugs, alcohol, nicotine, but it goes deeper than that. Addiction can take many forms beyond chemicals. It could be compulsive shopping, endlessly chasing approval, scrolling through social media without purpose, or relying on distractions like pornography. These behaviors are also addictions, driven by the same underlying forces. At its core, addiction is a response to pain. Not just physical pain, but emotional and psychological suffering. Gabor Mate, a well-known expert on addiction, said something important. The question is not why the addiction, but why the pain. This shifts the focus away from the addictive behavior itself and onto the reason behind it. What is the pain that someone is trying to escape? That pain is often a sense of emptiness, a void inside that feels unbearable. This void can come from many sources: trauma, loneliness, shame, or unresolved conflicts from the past. It's a place inside the mind that feels unsafe or incomplete. Instead of facing that emptiness, the mind seeks to fill it with something external. Addiction becomes a way to avoid confronting this inner emptiness. The behaviors or substances temporarily numb the pain or distract from the uncomfortable thoughts and feelings beneath the surface. This creates a loop. The more the person tries to escape the pain, the more the pain grows stronger underneath, hidden but not healed. This avoidance is not random. It is a defense mechanism the mind creates to protect itself. The parts of ourselves we don't want to see or admit remain out of sight in what Carl Jung called the unconscious. Addiction works as a way to block access to this unconscious material, keeping it locked away. Instead of engaging with the uncomfortable or hidden aspects of the self, the addicted mind chooses the easier path, numbing or distraction. Over time, this avoidance takes over, and the addiction gains control. It becomes the default way to handle distress or discomfort. So addiction is not simply a habit or lack of willpower. It's a signal pointing to something deeper. It reveals a fracture inside the self, where parts have been pushed down or rejected. The addictive behaviors are attempts to fill a gap left by those suppressed pieces. Understanding addiction in this way changes how we approach recovery. It's not just about stopping the substance or behavior. It's about looking at the pain and the void that the addiction tries to cover. Only by addressing this can true healing begin. Carl Jung introduced the idea of the shadow to explain a hidden part of the human mind. This shadow is the section of ourselves we push away, deny, or refuse to accept. It is not about being bad or evil, but simply parts that society or our upbringing taught us to reject. Everyone carries this shadow, yet few understand what it means or how it shapes their behavior. From early childhood, people begin to hide aspects of who they are to fit in or survive. Children learn quickly what is acceptable and what is not. For example, a boy might notice that showing sensitivity or tears brings criticism or rejection. To avoid this, he learns to hide those feelings and act tough. The vulnerable part of himself gets locked away, out of sight. Similarly, a girl might discover that expressing anger leads to being labeled as difficult or unkind. She suppresses those feelings, learning to smile and be agreeable instead. These hidden parts don't disappear. They move into a deeper level of the mind, the unconscious. They form a gap inside, a space filled with rejected traits and emotions. This void grows as more parts of the self are denied. It is this absence that creates inner tension. The mind struggles to keep these hidden elements contained, but they continue to influence thoughts and behavior without awareness. This rejected self is not harmless. It can manifest through behaviors that seem irrational or destructive. Addiction is one way the shadow expresses itself. When people use substances or habits to escape pain, they are often trying to avoid facing the shadow. The addiction masks what is uncomfortable inside, a side they have been taught to ignore or reject. Understanding the shadow means recognizing that the problem is not these parts themselves, but the refusal to accept them. They exist in everyone, not as enemies, but as pieces needing recognition. Ignoring the shadow only pushes it deeper, making it harder to address. Accepting the shadow requires honesty and courage. It means seeing those hidden parts without judgment. This process is central to healing addiction because it reveals the root causes instead of just addressing surface symptoms. The addiction may seem like the main issue, but it is actually a symptom of a deeper disconnection from the self. In this way, Jung's shadow connects directly to addiction. Both involve parts of the person that have been denied or suppressed. Addiction becomes an attempt to deal with the gap created by these rejected elements. To recover, a person must begin to face the shadow, allowing the unconscious parts to return into awareness and integration. Only when the shadow is accepted can the void shrink and the cycle of addiction be broken. This is not about fighting or eliminating the shadow, but learning to live with all parts of oneself, even those once hidden or feared. This insight is key to understanding why addiction is more than just a habit. It is a call to reconnect with the whole self. There are parts of ourselves we push down, locked away because they hurt or don't fit with who we want to be. These parts carry pain, memories, and wounds from early life. When a child faces trauma or rejection, certain feelings and experiences get buried deep inside. This is how the shadow grows. It collects everything we don't want to face: the shame, the fear, the anger, and the confusion. These things don't disappear. Instead, they create a split inside the mind, something Jung called psychic fragmentation. The self breaks into pieces, some visible, others hidden. This division isn't just a mental trick. It affects behavior, choices, and how we relate to the world. The parts locked in the shadow influence the conscious mind without our awareness. They push and pull in ways we don't understand. The more we ignore these hidden aspects, the stronger their grip becomes beneath the surface. When the pain inside is too much, the mind looks for relief. This relief often comes in the form of addiction. Addiction offers a way to escape, to numb the feelings that have been rejected. It provides a temporary shield from the discomfort of facing what's inside. But this shield is fragile and the relief is brief. Over time, the addiction takes control, becoming the dominant way to handle inner pain. Take Alex, for example. On the surface, he seems like any other man, but his life is tangled in a struggle with alcohol. It's not just a habit or a bad choice. For Alex, drinking is a way to avoid memories and feelings from his childhood. When he was young, he was often ignored and shamed for not being tough enough. That shame built a wall inside him. The parts of himself that felt vulnerable and rejected were pushed away, locked in the shadow. As Alex grew older, the shame didn't disappear. It stayed hidden, influencing his decisions and behavior. Every time he felt close to facing those memories, the discomfort was too much. Instead of confronting the pain, he reached for a drink. The alcohol dulled the shame and made the world feel less threatening. But it also kept those feelings locked deeper inside. Alex's addiction is not just a problem with alcohol. It's a response to the parts of himself he's abandoned. His drinking is a signal, a cry from the shadow. The addiction demands attention, even if it doesn't seem to make sense on the surface. It tries to fill a space left empty by rejection and pain. This connection between the shadow and addiction shows how the two are linked. Addiction isn't just about willpower or bad habits. It's about the parts of ourselves we refuse to see or accept. These hidden parts shape our lives in ways we might not understand. Until they are brought into awareness, they will continue to influence us. Jung said it clearly: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This means that the things we don't face inside ourselves control our actions and decisions. We may think we are free, but the unconscious guides us in ways we don't realize. For Alex, recovery begins when he starts to notice the feelings beneath his drinking. It happens when he realizes that the shame he's running from is part of himself. Facing this doesn't mean the shame disappears right away, but it means he stops letting it control his life from the shadows. This process is difficult and requires honesty. It asks us to look at the parts we've hidden and accept them without judgment. Addiction is more than a surface problem. It is a symptom of something deeper. It reflects a fracture in the self, where pain has been pushed away. The mind tries to protect itself by hiding these parts, but the cost is high. The more we avoid, the stronger the addiction becomes. Healing begins when we break the silence and bring those hidden pieces into the light. This integration helps reduce the need to escape. Alex's story is one example of how addiction works as a form of avoidance. It shows how deeply connected addiction is to the unconscious mind. Understanding this helps explain why addiction is so hard to overcome. It's not just about stopping a behavior, it's about reconnecting with the parts of ourselves that have been lost. In the end, addiction points to something more. It reveals the wounds and divisions within. When we start to face these parts, the addiction loses its power. The shadow becomes less of a prison and more of a guide, leading us to wholeness. This is why shadow work matters. It is the path to healing the fractures inside. Without it, addiction will continue to control us. With it, we find a way to reclaim the parts we have lost and move toward freedom. Shadow work is a process that asks us to bring into light the parts of ourselves we usually avoid or ignore. It involves becoming aware of the unconscious aspects that influence our thoughts and actions but remain hidden beneath the surface. This work isn't about trying to change or fix those parts immediately. Instead, it's about recognizing and accepting them as parts of who we are. In essence, shadow work means integrating what has been split off from our conscious awareness. It's important to understand that shadow work is not therapy. Therapy often focuses on healing specific wounds or managing mental health conditions. Shadow work is closer to a philosophical practice. It's a form of self-reconciliation, a way to meet and accept the totality of the self, including the pieces we might consider uncomfortable or unacceptable. One of the first steps in shadow work is simply noticing. This requires attention and honesty. When something uncomfortable comes up, a thought, a feeling, a behavior, it becomes a signal to explore what might be hidden behind it. Instead of pushing it away or labeling it bad, shadow work invites curiosity. The goal is to observe without judgment. Journaling is a common tool in this practice. Writing down thoughts and feelings helps uncover patterns and reveal parts of the self that usually remain silent. Sometimes questions are posed to the journal, like, "What am I avoiding right now?" Or, "What part of me wants to be seen?" Through this dialogue on paper, unconscious material can start to emerge. Another useful approach is inner child dialogue. This technique involves imagining conversations with the younger version of yourself. The child inside often holds memories and emotions that have been suppressed. By talking to this inner child, we can listen to what has been overlooked or rejected. It becomes a way to offer understanding and acceptance to parts that once felt unsafe or unwanted. Meditation also plays a role in shadow work. It helps create space for awareness without distraction. Through meditation, the mind learns to observe thoughts and feelings as they arise, without reacting or labeling them. This creates a calm environment where unconscious material can surface naturally. The practice strengthens the ability to stay present with what appears, even when it's uncomfortable. Art and dream interpretation are additional paths to explore the shadow. Dreams often carry messages from the unconscious mind, presenting images and stories that reveal hidden aspects. Paying attention to dreams and reflecting on their meaning can provide valuable insight. Creating art, whether through drawing, painting, or other forms, allows expression beyond words. It gives the shadow a way to communicate when language falls short. Throughout all these practices, the key element is non-judgmental awareness. Shadow work does not require approval or rejection of any part that arises. It is not about labeling parts as good or bad. Instead, it invites acceptance of the whole self without conditions. This acceptance reduces resistance and opens the door to integration. The idea is simple but profound. You don't fight the shadow, you understand it. When parts of the self that were once hidden come into consciousness, they lose their power to control from the shadows. Instead, they become aspects of the self that can be recognized, accepted, and managed. This process takes time and patience. The shadow is not something to be conquered overnight. It requires ongoing attention and willingness to face what is uncomfortable. The reward is a greater sense of wholeness and freedom. By integrating the shadow, the fractured parts of the mind begin to unite, reducing inner conflict. Shadow work changes the relationship with oneself. It shifts from avoidance to acceptance, from rejection to understanding. This shift is essential for true healing and growth. Addiction, in particular, often stems from the refusal to face the shadow. When this work begins, it allows the underlying causes to come into view, breaking the cycle of escape. Ultimately, shadow work is a journey towards self-awareness. It invites us to see all parts of who we are and to live in harmony with them. Through this integration, life becomes more authentic and choices become clearer. The unconscious no longer directs the narrative behind the scenes, but becomes part of the story we tell ourselves consciously. The practice is accessible, but requires courage. It means looking honestly at the aspects we've hidden, listening without judgment, and welcoming what emerges. Shadow work doesn't promise quick fixes, but it offers something deeper: reconnection with the self. This reconnection is the foundation for lasting change. Without it, attempts to overcome problems like addiction may only address symptoms. With it, transformation can occur from the inside out. This is the power of shadow work, a path from fragmentation to wholeness. Healing the parts of ourselves that have been hidden is rarely simple. It comes with resistance, challenges, and discomfort. The process of integration, the act of bringing the shadow into awareness, is not smooth or easy. It demands facing truths about ourselves that many would rather avoid. This confrontation with reality sometimes feels like losing who we think we are, a concept known as ego death. The ego is the part of us that builds identity, holding on to the image we want the world to see. It's the voice that tells us we are strong, capable, and in control. When shadow work begins, the ego's role is threatened. It no longer can keep certain parts hidden or deny uncomfortable truths. This challenge to identity creates resistance. The mind pushes back against anything that threatens its sense of stability. At the same time, society itself does not encourage this kind of inner work. The world rewards productivity, performance, and outward success. It praises those who maintain a composed image and penalizes vulnerability. In this environment, admitting to broken parts or hidden pain feels unsafe. The culture does not value shadow work because it disrupts the smooth appearance of life. This gap between inner needs and external rewards creates a common obstacle. Many turn instead to what is called a spiritual bypass. This occurs when people use wellness practices, self-help tools, or spiritual beliefs to avoid real inner work. Meditation, positive thinking, or even therapy become tools for distraction rather than true healing. The shadow remains untouched beneath the surface, hidden by a veneer of improvement. The difficulty of shadow work is that it intensifies pain before relief comes. Bringing unconscious material into light forces us to face emotional discomfort, sometimes deeply buried wounds. This process can feel like breaking down, as old defenses collapse and raw truths emerge. The mind may resist this breakdown by retreating into denial, distraction, or addiction. But this breaking point is also the start of a breakthrough. The deeper the pain surfaces, the greater the opportunity for healing. Facing these difficult moments opens the door to integration. It allows the fragmented parts of the self to begin uniting, reducing inner conflict. Joseph Campbell described this with a simple but powerful idea. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. This means that the very place inside ourselves we avoid, the dark, painful parts, is where healing and growth lie. Avoiding these areas keeps us trapped, while entering them leads to freedom. In moments of breakdown, it may feel like losing control. But these moments also carry the possibility of transformation. The resistance fades as the shadow is accepted rather than rejected. The ego reshapes itself, no longer needing to hide or deny. This process requires patience and courage. It's not a quick fix, but a long journey. The obstacles faced are part of the path, not signs to give up. Healing does not mean erasing pain, but learning to live with it differently, allowing it to inform rather than control. In the end, the integration of the shadow changes how we relate to ourselves and the world. It softens the divisions inside, creating space for wholeness. This wholeness is not perfection, but acceptance of all parts, including those once feared or denied. This journey is difficult because it challenges the foundation of identity and social norms. It calls us to step beyond comfort and face what we've hidden, but it also offers a deeper sense of freedom and authenticity. The process may bring moments of confusion and discomfort. The ego will resist, society will misunderstand, and the pain will rise. Yet through these struggles, the path to healing unfolds. The shadows that once controlled from the dark become companions on the way to wholeness. This is the challenge of integration, the resistance to healing, and the promise beyond it. It is a necessary passage for anyone seeking freedom from addiction or any form of avoidance. Only by stepping into the feared cave can the treasure of self-acceptance and balance be found. When the shadow is brought into awareness, something shifts inside. The parts once hidden stop pulling strings from the background. Instead, they become pieces of a whole that can be acknowledged and understood. This process of integration changes how we relate to ourselves and to the struggles that once controlled us. Addiction, which often serves as a way to escape those hidden parts, begins to lose its hold. The transformation doesn't mean addiction simply disappears overnight. It's not about reaching a state of perfect control or flawless behavior. Instead, it's about reclaiming parts of the self that were lost or abandoned. These include power, passion, and aspects of identity that addiction had buried beneath layers of numbness or denial. This is why the opposite of addiction is not just sobriety. Sobriety can be an empty state if it only means abstaining from substances or behaviors without deeper change. What replaces addiction is connection. Connection first with oneself and then with the world. This connection provides a foundation that addiction cannot replace or imitate. Take Alex, whose story we met earlier. After years of using alcohol to avoid the shame buried in his past, he reached a turning point. He began to face the parts of himself that were hidden, the vulnerable child who had felt rejected and unworthy. This was difficult but essential. He stopped fighting the shadow and started to listen. Through this work, Alex gradually reclaimed his sense of self. He reconnected with passions he had abandoned, like painting and music, which had once brought him joy but had been pushed aside as his addiction took over. These creative outlets helped him express what words could not. Slowly, he rebuilt a sense of identity that was not defined by shame or escape. He also found a voice that had been silenced by years of self-judgment and avoidance. Speaking honestly about his experience, not only to himself but to others, allowed him to break free from isolation. This connection to others reinforced his journey and reminded him that he was more than his addiction. Alex's transformation was not a miracle or a sudden cure. It was a gradual process of inner change, rooted in honesty and willingness to face difficult truths. The shadow that had once controlled him became a source of strength, guiding him toward wholeness instead of fracture. This transformation happens when the inner world shifts. The mind, once fragmented, begins to unify. The parts that felt lost or broken are brought back into the fold. This integration reduces the urge to escape and opens the possibility of living fully in the present. Others who engage in shadow work experience similar changes. They find new energy for life and reconnect with desires and dreams that addiction had obscured. Power is reclaimed, not as dominance over others, but as self-mastery and acceptance. Self-worth grows because it is no longer tied to external approval or avoidance of pain. Transformation through integration is a process of re-owning the self. It means recognizing all parts, even those that were once rejected, as valuable. It means building a relationship with oneself based on acceptance rather than denial. This foundation makes addiction less appealing because the need to escape diminishes. The journey is ongoing. Challenges arise and setbacks may occur. But with each step toward integration, the grip of addiction weakens. The path forward becomes clearer, fueled by a deeper connection to the self. In this way, shadow work offers more than just relief from addiction. It opens the door to a more authentic life. A life where power is held internally, passion is rekindled, and self-worth is rooted in truth. It's a transformation of the inner world that changes the way the outer world is experienced. This process reminds us that healing is not about erasing the past or pretending parts of ourselves don't exist. It's about embracing complexity and finding balance. Through integration, what was once hidden becomes part of a larger story, one of growth, connection, and renewed purpose. Alex's story illustrates how facing the shadow changes the relationship with addiction. It becomes less about control and more about understanding, less about fighting and more about accepting. This shift allows a new life to emerge, built on connection rather than avoidance. Ultimately, the power of shadow work lies in its ability to transform the inner narrative. It turns isolation into connection and fragmentation into wholeness. Through this process, addiction loses its hold, and the path to freedom opens. This transformation is not a destination, but a journey, a continuous process of meeting and integrating all parts of the self. It requires courage, honesty, and persistence. But the reward is a life lived with greater clarity, strength, and authenticity. There is a space inside each person, often unrecognized, that feels empty. This emptiness is what many try to fill with distractions, substances, or habits. It is not a simple absence, but a deeper silence, a void. This void is not separate from who we are. In fact, it is exactly the part we avoid meeting. The emptiness we run from is ourselves, or more precisely, the parts of ourselves we have hidden or denied. Addiction is often seen as a weakness or failure, a flaw to be fixed or cured. But that view misses the larger picture. Addiction is not simply a problem to erase. It is a signal. It points inward toward something neglected or forgotten. It calls attention to the parts of the self that have been silenced. In this way, addiction acts like a compass, directing the person to look inside rather than outside for answers. The challenge is that looking inward means stopping the constant running. It means confronting the void, the silence, the parts once hidden. This is uncomfortable and often terrifying. The mind prefers distraction, control, and avoidance. But when the running stops, something changes. The monster we feared, the emptiness, the shadow, does not disappear. Instead, it shifts role. It becomes a guide, leading toward understanding rather than chaos. People who begin this journey often share a similar turning point. They realize that fighting the inner emptiness only deepens the struggle. Instead, accepting the void opens space for healing. This does not mean surrender or defeat. It means recognizing the void as a part of the whole self, worthy of attention rather than rejection. Scenes emerge of individuals choosing to turn inward. Some sit quietly, practicing meditation. Others write in journals, facing thoughts once avoided. Some engage in creative expression or therapy, opening doors to the hidden parts. Each act is a step toward meeting the self fully, without denial or fear. This inward turn marks a shift from external escape to internal exploration. It moves away from seeking relief through substances or behaviors toward seeking wholeness through connection with the self. The process is not easy. It is a slow, sometimes painful unfolding, but it is also a path to freedom, a freedom that comes not from control over the outside world, but from peace within. The final message is clear. Shadow work is not about fixing something broken. It is about remembering what was always there beneath the surface. The parts of ourselves that the world taught us to hide, shame, or reject are not mistakes. They are pieces of our true nature. This remembrance is a return, a homecoming to a self before masks, defenses, and avoidance. It is a recognition that the void we feared was never empty but full of potential for growth and healing. By facing the void, we find not absence but presence, not loss but connection. The journey inward reveals that the monster is not an enemy, but a teacher. The parts we once feared guide us toward wholeness. The void becomes a source of strength rather than weakness. In this way, the cycle of addiction can be transformed. What once trapped and controlled can become a doorway to self-awareness and integration. The struggle is not against the self, but with the self, a difficult but necessary passage. As this understanding takes hold, a new story emerges. One where the shadow and light coexist, where wholeness is not perfection but acceptance, where healing is not erasure but integration. The final words remind us that the path is ongoing. Shadow work requires courage to face what was hidden, patience to stay present with discomfort, and honesty to accept all parts without judgment. It is not a quick fix, but a lifelong commitment to truth. Ultimately, the shadow is not something to defeat or fear. It is a part of us waiting to be seen, heard, and embraced. In remembering who we were before the world taught us to hide, we reclaim our power, our voice, and our true self. This is the final message. The void you have tried to fill is not empty, it is you, and by facing it you begin to live fully and freely. Thank you for watching. Kindly like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more educational content. Thank you.